What if I told you Japan once attacked the United States with the world's first intercontinental weapon launched not from a ship or a plane, but from a paper balloon? This is not science fiction. This is the true story of the Fugo balloon bombs, a top-secret Japanese weapon deployed in 1944. These hydrogen-filled giants rode the jet stream across 6,000 miles of open Pacific sky, carrying deadly payloads meant to ignite panic and wildfires across North America. But for a weapon designed to terrorize a continent, its deadliest impact came not on a battlefield, but during a Sunday picnic in rural Oregon. It was bold. It was silent. It almost worked, and yet it failed spectacularly. A weapon built on the cutting edge of atmospheric science was ultimately defeated by the weather. This video will reveal how Imperial Japan attempted to turn the sky itself into a weapon, and why their grand plan drifted off course in the most tragic and ironic way possible, November 1944. The war in the Pacific had turned against Japan. American forces were leapfrogging across the islands, getting closer to the Japanese mainland. Strategic bombing raids from B-29 superfortresses were leveling Japanese cities. The Imperial Navy was crippled, and American submarines had strangled Japan's supply lines. In desperation, Tokyo sought any means to strike back, preferably directly on American soil. Enter Major General Tsuyoshi Kusaba, head of Japan's Noborito Research Institute. This secretive facility had been tasked with developing unconventional warfare tools, including chemical weapons, sabotage devices, and now, an audacious long-range weapon. Kusaba and his engineers had recently learned of a new atmospheric phenomenon, the high-speed jet stream that flowed from Asia to North America at altitudes of over 30,000 feet. Kusaba proposed what sounded like science fiction giant hydrogen balloons that could float across the Pacific Ocean, carrying incendiary and anti-personnel bombs. No pilots, no engines, just wind. He pitched the idea to the Imperial Japanese Army General Staff, to a nation with no ability to reach America with traditional aircraft. This kamikaze-in-the-sky concept was revolutionary. The generals approved it immediately. Thousands of workers, including schoolgirls, were mobilized to build the balloon envelopes out of washi paper and glue. Assembly lines churned out devices by the hundreds. Launch stations were built on Japan's eastern coast. The code name, Fugo. Japan envisioned mass panic, wildfires across the West Coast, and a psychological victory that would shake American morale. Official propaganda promised the balloons would turn forests into infernos and cities into ruins. Tokyo believed the wind would carry vengeance. But they overlooked one fatal problem: the wind doesn't follow orders. Jet streams shift. Weather is chaotic. And once those balloons left Japan's shores, they were utterly at the mercy of nature. There would be no steering, no targeting, no retrieval. The success of the entire mission rested on an invisible river of air that even scientists barely understood. Still, the first launches began by late fall 1944. Japan was betting everything on a weapon they couldn't aim, hoping it would hit a target they couldn't see on paper. The Fugo balloon bomb was an engineering marvel. Each unit measured over 33 feet in diameter when fully inflated with hydrogen, constructed from layers of handmade washi paper sealed with konnyaku glue. The balloon was light enough to rise above 30,000 feet, but sturdy enough supposedly to endure a trans-Pacific flight. Attached to its base was a complex payload system, a ring of sandbag ballast weights, a barometric pressure sensor to regulate altitude, and a timed detonator with up to 4 incendiary or anti-personnel bombs. The design was clever. As the balloon lost altitude at night, it would drop sandbags one by one. If it descended too far, the system would jettison weight to rise again. Once it reached North America, a final mechanism would release the bombs and, ideally, destroy the balloon to erase all evidence. Over 9,000 of these devices were launched between November 1944 and April 1945. The Japanese military expected at least 10% to reach the continental U.S., and they weren't wrong. Around 1,000 balloons did make it to North America. Some landed as far east as Michigan, Others reached Mexico and Alaska. One even knocked out power to the Hanford nuclear facility in Washington state, where components for the atomic bomb were being developed. Compared to conventional bombing raids, Fugo seemed like a miracle weapon. No pilots, no risk, a fraction of the cost. It was, on paper, 10 times cheaper than any long-range bomber sortie, and it didn't require any fuel, at a time when Japan had almost none. But here's the twist. The entire design hinged on one unstable variable, the jet stream. First discovered by Japanese meteorologists only a few years prior, this high-altitude wind corridor wasn't well understood. It varied wildly by season, speed, and latitude, and Fugo had no onboard guidance, no ability to course correct. Once launched, it was as blind as a message in a bottle. The result? Most balloons veered off target, crashed into the ocean, or landed harmlessly in remote terrain. The very system that made the project feasible, the jet stream, was the same force that made it uncontrollable. To turn Kusaba's concept into reality, Japan mobilized a vast wartime workforce, over 1,000 technicians, chemists, and even teenage schoolgirls were recruited to manufacture thousands of Fugo balloons. The construction process was both meticulous and desperate. Each envelope was made from 600 pieces of washi paper, glued together with a paste made from tuber starch. The materials were chosen for their lightweight and availability, not durability. Factories in cities like Ichinomiya and Ogawa were converted into balloon workshops, where girls worked in freezing conditions to paste together enormous paper skins by hand. It took up to a week to build each balloon, and over 19,000 were eventually completed, although only about 900 were launched. Every step had to be done manually. No automation, no standardization. The launch sites along Japan's east coast, most notably near Otsu and Ibaraki, became makeshift runways for this strange new weapon. But as production scaled, the flaws multiplied. First, hydrogen proved to be a volatile gamble. Generating enough gas to fill a 33-foot balloon required massive amounts of sulfuric acid and iron filings, resources already in short supply. And the gas itself was a constant danger. Balloons exploded during inflation. Workers suffered burns. Some stations caught fire. Second, the balloons were fragile. Even light winds could rip seams or destabilize launch trajectories. And in flight, many were torn apart by turbulence in the upper atmosphere or collapsed when the ballast system malfunctioned. Third, the altitude control system, brilliant in theory, was tragically inconsistent. The barometric triggers, made with primitive Japanese electronics, often misfired. Some balloons dropped all their ballast too early. Others failed to release their bombs at all. Then one day, the unthinkable happened. Reports from Canada and the western United States confirmed the arrival of mysterious balloon-like objects. American civilians began discovering them in forests, on farms, even tangled in power lines. The Japanese leadership was stunned. "We believed they would strike terror," one official later admitted. Instead, they were often mistaken for weather balloons, or worse, ignored entirely. Worse still. A critical detail had been overlooked: the seasonal variability of the jet stream. By April 1945, as spring disrupted wind patterns, the Fugo balloons began falling short of their target altogether, crashing into the ocean or landing in Alaska. The final blow came when the U.S. military imposed a media blackout. Japan had no way of knowing if their attacks were working. They launched in silence, hoping for chaos, and heard only silence in return. From the beginning, Japan's Fugo campaign was little more than a scientific experiment disguised as military strategy. The Japanese had no way to test the balloons over long distances before deployment. Once launched, the hydrogen-filled giants simply drifted eastward into the Pacific, vanishing from sight. The first confirmation that the balloons had actually reached their target came from scattered reports in the United States. One landed near Thermopolis, Wyoming, in late 1944. Over the following weeks, more were discovered in California, Montana, and even British Columbia. Tokyo had expected precision. They believed the jet stream would carry their deadly cargo directly into American cities and forests, where the incendiary bombs would start wildfires, kill civilians, and sow mass panic. In reality, the balloons landed randomly, scattered across thousands of miles. Most of them were found in remote forests, frozen farmland, and wide-open plains far from anything of military or symbolic value. The Japanese military dreamed of headlines and hysteria, but what they got was silence. Not because their plan worked, but because it failed so quietly. The U.S. government chose to bury it. American authorities imposed a media blackout, ensuring that no stories of balloon bomb discoveries would be printed. This censorship meant Japan heard nothing in return. And in war, no news was assumed to be good news. Then, disaster struck. On May 5, 1945, near Bly, Oregon, a group of children and their Sunday school teacher discovered a strange wreckage in the woods. As they approached, one of the unexploded bombs detonated, killing all 6 instantly. They became the only civilians killed on the U.S. mainland due to enemy action during World War II. Eyewitnesses struggled to describe what they'd seen. One Nebraska farmer said, "It looked like a parachute." A Canadian woodsman recalled thinking, "We thought it was a toy." And a park ranger reported, "It was beautiful until it exploded." In the months that followed, Japan attempted several patch-up efforts. They swapped out the bomb types, adjusted the size of the balloons, and even changed launch schedules to catch better weather patterns. But none of it changed the outcome. Most balloons either blew up mid-flight, sank in the Pacific, or drifted into the uninhabited wilderness. And yet, the cruelest irony of all wasn't the failed technology. It was the false hope, because America said nothing. Japan believed they were striking fear into the heart of the enemy. In truth, they were aiming at a continent and hitting empty air. The real scientific flaw behind the Fugo balloon bombs wasn't in the balloons themselves. It was in the very air they depended on. The entire system relied on the jet stream, a powerful high-altitude wind current flowing from Japan toward North America. But there was a problem: the jet stream isn't constant. It shifts dramatically with the seasons, varying in altitude, speed, and direction. Japanese meteorologists had only recently discovered it, and their understanding was limited. That meant Japan was launching a weapon based on a force of nature they couldn't predict or control. At best, it was controlled chaos. At worst, it was blind faith. Meanwhile, their Axis ally Germany had developed the V-2 rocket, a terrifying and precise long-range weapon that struck London with supersonic speed. In contrast, Japan's balloon bombs were fragile, slow, and directionless. While the V-2 killed thousands, the Fugo project caused just 6 deaths tragic. Yes, but hardly the devastation Japan had hoped for. Inside Japan, there were no accurate assessments of Fugo's effectiveness. Because the American press remained silent, Japan received no confirmation of success or failure. Without feedback, the program operated in a vacuum, literally and figuratively. It was a ghost weapon. An internal report prepared by the Noborito Institute months later acknowledged what few dared to admit publicly: the project had no measurable military impact. It had consumed enormous manpower, resources, and hope, all launched into the wind. Fugo was not just a technical failure, it was a psychological one. It embodied a wartime lesson that still resonates today: that innovation without control is just chaos in disguise. You can dream as big as the Pacific Ocean, but if you can't steer the wind, all you're doing is letting go. By spring 1945, Japan's balloon bomb campaign had run its course. The last Fugo units were launched in April, as warming temperatures weakened the jet stream. With no evidence of success, and no more seasonal winds to ride, the Imperial Army quietly shut down the program. No victory, no fanfare, just silence. The fate of the project's mastermind, Major General Tsuyoshi Kusaba, was equally quiet. After the war, he returned to civilian life and faded into obscurity. The Noborito Institute, once a hub of covert innovation, was dissolved and its wartime research buried by the post-war government. For decades, the Fugo project remained a historical footnote intentionally forgotten. As for cost, official records are scarce, but estimates suggest Japan spent the equivalent of 2 million 1940s US dollars on the program. Adjusted for inflation, that's around 30 million today, an enormous investment for a weapon that killed 6 people, 6 civilians, on a church picnic. Yes, that's the punchline. Thousands of engineers, 9,000 balloons, millions of yen, and half a year of production, all to kill 5 children and a Sunday school teacher in rural Oregon. It's one of the most tragic and absurd footnotes in military history, and yet the final twist adds even more irony. One of the balloon bombs caused a blackout at the Hanford site in Washington, the very facility working on the atomic bomb that would help end the war. The Japanese unknowingly came within miles of disrupting the Manhattan Project, but never knew it. So let's break it down. 6 months, 9,000 balloons, $30 million, over 1,000 workers, and the result, a picnic massacre, and complete strategic irrelevance, despite its failure. The Fugo program left behind more than shredded balloons and tragic headlines. It marked the first time in history that a weapon crossed an ocean without a human pilot laying the conceptual groundwork for intercontinental warfare. The idea of using the atmosphere as a delivery system, while poorly executed by Japan, would echo loudly in future conflicts. America took notice. After the war, U.S. scientists and intelligence analysts studied the remnants of the Fugo campaign and were stunned by the complexity of the altitude control system. Barometric switches, timed ballast releases, and temperature-compensated components, all crafted under resource-starved wartime conditions, showed surprising ingenuity. These ideas later influenced both high-altitude weather balloons and early concepts for spy systems like the U.S. Project Genetrix, which used similar principles to send surveillance equipment over the Soviet Union. More broadly, the Fugo program spurred interest in jet stream research. The United States began systematically studying high-altitude wind patterns, a field that would prove critical for the Cold War's Intercontinental Ballistic Missile (ICBM) development. The sky was no longer just a backdrop for airplanes, it was now a battlefield. What lessons does this bizarre chapter in military history offer today? First, logistics will always defeat fantasy. A brilliant idea means nothing if you can't deliver it consistently and accurately. Second nature is not your ally. The jet stream is a force, not a partner. Building a weapon that depends on the weather is like firing a gun and hoping the wind pulls the trigger. Third, secrecy can buy time, but not victory. Japan believed they were succeeding simply because no one told them otherwise. Silence is not proof of success. It's often the sound of irrelevance. So, while the Fugo balloons never changed the outcome of the war, their strange legacy floated on, shaping the winds of future warfare in ways their creators never imagined. Imagine if the Fugo campaign had worked. Imagine thousands of balloon bombs descending silently onto the forests of Oregon, Washington, and California, igniting massive wildfires during the dry season. Imagine the American public waking up to news of unexplained explosions, flames racing through national parks, or even infrastructure crippled by invisible hands from across the ocean. In this alternate history, the United States might have diverted critical resources from the Pacific theater to defend the homeland. Civilian panic could have sparked political pressure. The psychological blow of being attacked on the mainland, however minor the damage, might have reshaped military strategy or accelerated retaliation. But the truth is, the Fugo project's failure was a hidden blessing for both sides. For Japan, it meant avoiding the horror of an American nuclear reprisal triggered by mainland devastation. For the U.S., it avoided further domestic casualties and ensured the war effort remained focused overseas. Sometimes, failure isn't just a dead end, it's a safety valve. In the case of Japan's floating bombs, the biggest tragedy wasn't their impact, it's what could have happened if they'd actually worked. And this is only failure number 6 in our countdown of World War II's most bizarre and broken inventions. A 6-month campaign, over 9,000 balloons, $30 million. And the result, 6 tragic deaths, 0 military damage, and a weapon that drifted quietly into the history books. Japan's Fugo project was ambitious, imaginative, and ultimately, a masterclass in how not to weaponize the wind. If you found this story as shocking as we did, hit that subscribe button because the next video dives into Nazi Germany's suicidal rocket interceptor, a weapon so dangerous it killed more of its own pilots than enemies. What do you think is the most absurd military invention of World War II? Was it Japan's balloon bombs? Or is there something even more ridiculous out there? Drop your answer in the comments. And remember, the line between genius and madness is often measured in meters per second and gallons of hydrogen.